Welcome to the Collector's Archive. I am the Vault Keeper. Identify.
Hi, I'm Sven from Geekology and various other things which you're probably about to find out about.
Identity confirmed. Access granted. Switching to human interface.
And if anybody's really going to moan about it, you can always go first contact. Stuff the timeline.
Yeah. Yeah. Good afternoon, Sven. How are we doing, sir?
I'm okay. How are you doing?
I'm splendid. Thank you very much for asking. Firstly, I want to say thank you for agreeing to do this. I appreciate you taking the time to come and visit us in the vault. Hopefully, we're going to have a really good chat, find out, the history of Sven and his collecting journey. And we'll make a start. Yeah, pardon? Poor soul. No. There's lots of people out there I'm sure are interested to hear. It's all good stuff. So, if you would like to just take a moment to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, a little bit about yourself, and also if you want to, where you grew up.
I'm Sven. I was born in Birmingham. Never really gone that far from Birmingham, to be brutally honest. I think I had a little period when I was little, growing up in Tamworth, but most of my time's been in Brum, which is why Auto Assembly was in Brum.
Right.
Shockingly. I've been collecting Transformers, to be brutally honest, since '84. My mum got me an Optimus Prime for Christmas night in '84, and it might have been a bit earlier than that. It's up for debate because memories are not what they used to be. But the Optimus I ended up with wasn't actually an Optimus; it was a battle convoy with a sticker on the box because it was a sample that had been going out from Hasbro to buyers. And basically go, this is the kind of thing that we'd have in the range, and they just stuck the Transformers sticker over the top of the Diaclone stuff. Excellent. So I had a grey roller, and so on and so forth. So it was like, okay, all right, and then it just went from there. And I got a little bit too obsessed, maybe. For a little bit too long.
Right.
At
Obsession
one point,
in a collector? No.
No, it doesn't happen. And I always wanted to do. I always wanted to write about them and so on and so forth. So I was writing very, very intriguing stories that made zero sense when I was like 11, 12.
Right.
And so on and so forth. I found a project book of mine a few weeks ago for when I was in that kind of age, and it was like it was actually before Transformers. I was suggesting the idea of cars that turn into robots and all this kind of stuff. I don't know whether it had been influenced by GoBots or something at the time. But there's also a drawing of Space Dock and a bird of prey and this type of stuff.
A multiverse of madness.
Oh yeah, that's definitely my brain. But yeah, Transformers have basically been there since '84 when I was 9. So yeah, that's been one of the key backbones alongside Star Trek as my key fandoms, because my parents loved Star Trek, Trek, and my mom had a full set of the James Blish novelizations of the original series, which was my introduction. It was actually novelizations before I saw anything.
Right.
And the first film I saw at the cinema was Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan.
Right.
Don't recommend for a little boy.
No. It's the whole ear thing.
Yeah, totally. But then again, I ended up with a VHS tape of RoboCop when I was like 11 or 12 or whatever it was I was at the time. Don't do that.
So we've got So let's just unpack that a bit, because I think you might have covered about 3 or 4 questions there, Sven.
I'm so sorry.
It's cool. We'll backtrack a bit then. Before we go into the figure thing, we'll carry on with this film, TV show kind of thing.
Yeah.
What I know you've just mentioned there the Wrath of Khan and RoboCop and things like that, but what, maybe just a bit before that, what were the kind of things you were watching, cartoon wise or TV show wise? What was young Sven enjoying?
Not a lot.
No.
Was the honest answer.
Right.
I wasn't. I was far too interested in computers, and we'd had a computer at home since I think I was 3,
Hmm.
something like that. Basically, been there'd been a Commodore Kim 1 in the home for a little while, which didn't even have a connection for a screen. It just had little lights on it.
Yeah.
But there was a ZX80, a ZX81, there was VIC 20 at one point,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. So
Right.
I was when most kids were probably watching an awful lot of cartoons, I was
Yeah.
doing things on either a ZX81 or
Yeah.
a Commodore 128 or something like that.
Yeah.
So, and my parents had this thing about you can't buy games for it until you can program something yourself.
Right. Yeah.
So I was doing all sorts of weird, wonderful things. I've completely lost the ability now, but
Yeah. Oh, that's 10 print, Sven, 20 go to 10.
Oh yeah.
Really fun.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the number of times you would have found that in Laskey's or whatever around Birmingham city centre is kind of scary. But yeah.
Yeah.
There was, I mean, for instance, there was a massive Woolworths in Birmingham city centre, where you went down a double staircase down into the basement.
Yeah.
And there was about a third of a shop floor that was just home computers.
Right.
And we're talking VIC 20s and early C64s and things like that.
Yeah.
So I've got a kind of got a record of that in my head, but it's not a memory as such.
Yeah, the computer stuff, I'd have to be careful because I could do a whole another video on its own just for that. I mean, you're probably aware. I think we have chatted before in the past. We're not strangers to each other on this front. No. I was the same. I grew up with. I got my first computer in '82, which was Spectrum. I think I got it for my birthday in '82. I do have one just here. This is my everyday 48K with the black keys, not the grey keys. The black. I put some black keys on it.
Oh, okay.
There's
cool. Are they still dead flesh?
Yes, they're still dead flesh. Yeah,
excellent.
Yeah, you can get a whole plethora. That's my word of the day. Plethora.
Yeah.
Reproduction parts for the Spectrum. Face plates, different colour keys. I have an all white Spectrum.
Nice.
White keys, white case. That's downstairs in the cabinet. Is that? But cool. Just.
I must admit that the computer that grabbed my attention, the majority was the Amiga. That's where I really started to flourish and get into it in a massive way.
I was the opposite. I had an Atari ST, the
I'm so sorry.
FM, which, to be fair, I think they're pretty much the same. You know, you may disagree. Back in the day, in the day, I had the Atari. A friend of mine had the Amiga.
Yeah.
And to be fair, back then it was
the software was virtually identical because normally games, especially when the STF-FM was out, were made for the EST and then ported to the Amiga, so the differences were very minimal. It wasn't until probably the Batman pack came out that sales figures on the Amiga got high enough so that programming on that came first.
Right.
So right at the beginning, because the STFM came out in '86, I think it was, and the A500 didn't come out until '87, and it took until the Batman pack in the run up to Christmas '89 for them to be on parity.
Right.
That was the major selling difference in '89. Actually, is that the 520 STFM came with 20 games.
Yeah.
And the A500, up until David Pleasant Scott put his oar in, was coming with nothing.
Right.
Right. And then David saw what was going on and actually went to Ocean, who just got the license or working on the license for the Batman movie, and got them managed to license this brand new game to go in a brand new bundle, and that's how the A500 got its footprint in the UK.
That's mad. Is that I've got a book about Ocean. The games and design. I mean, because I love all that side as well. Again, that could be another video. Could that? And
I've got that book on my shelf as well.
Have you got the same book? Yeah. And these guys from Ocean are actually on the film sets while they're filming, making notes like a RoboCop and Batman, and it's just brilliant. It's amazing. But I always I enjoyed the Batman game. I enjoyed the RoboCop game, but you can see the DNA is there from both. They are pretty much the same game, just with a different pixels and avatar on them and things like that. Leave that. Let's move on swiftly.
Okay.
Toys or games or things like that as a child. What are you playing with when you're not on the computer and you're certainly not in front of the telly watching cartoons?
And that's a remarkably good question. Because before Transformers, I don't think there was any specific range or anything like that. I never had any He-Man toys.
No. Dinky, Corgi, Matchbox, any of that?
I think there was a Dinky Enterprise running around at one point. And maybe sort of like a motion picture or Wrath of Khan Corgi Enterprise as well.
Right.
But other than that, I think the only other things that might have been that stick out in any way, shape, or form were Big Track.
Mm-hmm.
There was a snow speeder at some point.
Right, yeah.
Which had little bendy plastic aliens in it because there was no action figures. And I know. I mean, this is the thing: is that a snow speeder seems to now be seen as like the demon child of Star Wars rebellion craft. But as a result of that, I think it's my favourite one.
Yeah. No, I had the snow speeder as a kid, and I loved it. It was a great toy to play with.
Well, it's the idea of having the two pilots as well, back to back. That was intriguing. But I have to admit that I was always more into the original Battlestar Galactica than I was Star Wars. So I like the whole cockpit thing going on there. So that's might be why. I think I might have imagined the snow speeder as a Viper at some point.
Right. Well, you could have certainly got away with it being a Buck Rogers starfighter.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. But sci-fi was always more of a driving point for me. It seems right from the start. And when I got into Transformers, it was more comic.
Right. Yeah.
That grabbed me, and the tech specs. The tech specs and the bio profiles on the back of the boxes were massively important to me.
Well, we've spoke about this in the past that the UK Marvel comic is it's the Bible for me for Transformers, more so than the cartoon. I can take and leave, but if it's for me, it's in the comic. That's how the characters are,
I mean, this is ironic for someone who actually worked on the DVDs at one point with Metrodome.
Right.
It wasn't until the movie came out that I watched any of the cartoons.
Right.
And then it was on VHS.
Yeah.
Because the number of times Arrival from Cybertron got rented. But then from that moment onwards, or even the first time, I might have seen a couple of episodes on TV, or rather a couple of 5-minute segments of episodes on TV. Because of the way it was shown over here. Is that those voices were in the comic, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes. I get that, and I'd agree with that. When reading the comic, Optimus Prime sounded like Peter Cullen.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is, it just is. It's always strange, I find, when you watch newer cartoons or newer iterations, and it doesn't sound like him. It's like, that's even if they're trying to do an impersonation of him, it's like, oh.
Yes. I mean, I must admit that the first audio of Optimus I heard was from Autobots Lightning Strike.
I knew you were going to bring them up. Yeah, yeah.
And it was just like when I first saw the show, I went, "Oh, that voice makes more sense."
Yeah. But
I mean, this is the thing: is I had a very high reading age when I was young.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether it all ties into this, but I always thought the cartoon series was too silly. When I was 10,
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
But then I'd been fed on a diet of Trek up until that point, so it was going to be along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, it was what it was in the fact that it was an elongated toy advert, and it was designed to appeal to the children, so they had to make it on that level too. But I had the Ladybird books, and I used to love them.
Yeah,
and people might find it odd, but I used to like the artwork as well. I liked the artwork in the early UK bred stories from the Marvel.
So they look like the toys.
Yeah. But it's not. But then there was also variations on that. There was one issue. Is it Man of Iron? The Man of Iron story arc.
Oh wow!
The artwork in that is great. It's phenomenal.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
so detailed.
Yeah,
and I think I might get this wrong, but I'm pretty sure the artist was one of the artists from Battle Action Force or Battle Action Comics.
Yes, I think so. Something along those lines.
But the detail on it, and even the portions that were in black and white. As a kid reading it, it was full color. You didn't see the black and white.
No, absolutely not. I mean, when they redid the comics as the hardback things from Hatchet, I was immensely pleased with the fact that they'd coloured in some of the black and white stuff, and then realised that I didn't notice when I was reading it because I'd automatically done it in my head anyway. All those years ago. So I completely understand your point of view on that one.
I'm actually working my way through the Hatchets. I collected them all.
Yeah.
When it got to issue 80 or thereabouts, and they announced they were doing up to 100, I wasn't surprised. I thought, they'll be round off. But it's interesting that again, it's the memory thing where I'm reading these stories, and I'm thinking, have I missed a story out here? It's like, well, I'm sure this is supposed to happen later than this, or is this part's happening a bit sooner? And then you've got the whole, there's a bit of a UK story, and then it flips to a US story. Now, I do remember Simon Furman mentioning that they were putting it in chronological order.
Yeah.
But it still skips a bit here and there.
It's a bit, it can be a bit jarring as you're going through it. But it is quite intriguing. I mean, it's like Man of Iron. How the poor Americans didn't get that for like 5 or 6 years.
No.
It's just like, I'm so sorry, guys.
Yeah.
And I'm still sore about issue. Was it issue 233? Yeah, 233 never turning up.
It's what issue? What
issue 233 of the original comic was it?
Right.
No, 333. I'm trying to remember what issue of the British comic it ended on. Was it 332?
It was in the 300s. It was in the 300s.
Yeah. So it was the fact that issue 333 never turned up was always the most annoying thing to me, because in 332 they did actually say, well, next issue will be going monthly, and it never happened.
It never happened. No. Yeah, because it started at fortnightly, then it did go to weekly. And then I think towards the back end, I think maybe sales were dropping off. It then went to fortnightly again. But
by that point, the British guys were writing for the American comic anyway.
Yeah. But that was what I enjoyed about the early UK stuff, was those stories like Man of Iron that they were horseshoeing in while they were waiting for the material from the US comics, because they were on monthly comics. So they had to do these filler stories and do them in a way that didn't contradict anything that was going to come up.
And then in the process managed to do better stories.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
Because I mean, I think the one that really impacted me, other than Man of Iron, was Enemy Within, and Raiders of the Last Ark.
Yes,
was just like, what? This is awesome. And the whole concept of Windcharger and Ravage working together.
Yeah.
But then we found out where Ravage had come from in that Yanyol as well. So it was like, yeah, now makes more sense. He's actually an Autobot that defected, and in fact, they all were Autobots who defected in the comic universe, or the British comic universe at least, which is quite cool. But,
yeah, no, there's some really good stuff. So did we find out then what you were playing with as a kid? Well, I can't remember.
Not a lot before Transformers, apparently.
Yeah, more Transformers. Yeah, you mentioned some Dinky. The Dinky Enterprise. I had that.
Yeah.
Loved it to death. Great figure.
Yeah.
I had the Klingon battle cruiser. It's a D5, right? Is it D5?
D7.
D7 was it?
Yeah.
I did the one on the TV show actually have the white plastic bullets that fired out?
No, it had photon torpedoes.
Yeah.
It's just you never. But the worst part is the Klingon battle cruiser didn't turn up until after it had been a Romulan vessel.
Right.
Because if you go back and watch the first few Klingon episodes, there's no ship. They never show you the ship.
No.
Because I hadn't built the model yet.
Right.
And then the first time it turned up as a Romulan vessel.
Right. Was it the same model they used for the Bird of Prey? Was it in Balance of Terror?
No. It was basically in the third season. I think it's third season. Enterprise Incident.
Right.
It was the first time the Klingon battle cruiser was ever seen, and it was actually we had a Bird of Prey that's drawn on the underneath of it.
Right.
And you mentioned the Bird of Prey. In Star Trek 3, the Bird of Prey in that was originally planned to be a Romulan vessel that Krug had stolen.
Right.
So that's when things get a bit complicated because in Enterprise Incident, it was I think 3 Klingon battle cruisers that Romulans had been using with Romulan markings on.
Right.
And then when they did they redid it as part of the remastered version. They actually put a Romulan Bird of Prey and 2 battle cruisers in that version.
Right.
Because the only reason the Bird of Prey wasn't in it is because the model had been destroyed.
Right.
Accidentally.
Right.
So that was all that thing going on. So I don't know whether it ended up in a book or anything, but the whole suggestion is that they swapped technologies because in Balance of Terror it was never actually stated that the Romulans had warp drive.
Right.
So to be where they were, they'd have to, but it was never actually said. So there were some suggestions that the Klingons swapped warp drive for the cloaking device because the cloaking device for Klingons didn't happen until that Bird of Prey in Star Trek 3.
Yeah.
So,
with their Bird of Prey. Yeah.
And
then you get to TNG, and then you've got all the different sized Bird of Preys.
Yes, the Broad class, Cavort class, so on and so forth, because they were using the same model.
Yeah.
So that when they put it next to the Enterprise D, it had to be double the size of the original one because the ship wasn't that much different in model size from the refit. So, and the same with the space dock. It's like the Enterprise D manages to get through the same hole in the space dock as the refit did, and you're like, that's going to have to be double the size then for that to happen.
Maybe it's the larger garage door around the back that it went.
Yeah. But when you look at the inside of it with the Enterprise D, it's sitting there without being cramped, and that ship is enormous in comparison. So
is it scale-wise in the Enterprise A supposed to be about as big as one of the nacelles on the Galaxy class?
Sort of, yeah. It's certainly a very small amount shorter than the saucer section.
Yeah.
Because AMT fortunately did 1/2500 scale kits,
right?
Of the original series, the refit and the D, and you could put them together, and it was like, oh dear God, the difference in size is enormous.
Yeah. I think I had those kits at one time. I did have a few of the MT kits hanging from the bedroom ceiling.
Oh yes, must be done.
Okay. Back on track. Well, no, it's not back on track.
I'm just trying to think of games I played back then.
Yeah,
an awful lot of Monopoly.
Yeah.
But it would have been computer games more than anything. Now, if we're talking 80s, there would have been an awful lot of Robocop playing.
Yeah.
When the moment that came out in '88.
Did they? I'm just trying to think. Did the port Manic Miner over to the Commodore?
Yes, I think they did. Yeah, it was very much later.
It'd have been under Software Projects then, wouldn't it? When
Yeah,
ported that
yeah,
over.
quite. I'm just trying to think what else I was playing. It's mostly mush. at this point.
Operation Wolf, things like that.
I think I played that on the Amiga rather than the 64, because a friend of mine had an Amiga 1000. Say friend of mine, friend of the family's. I think they were on the road, lived on the same road as us. And that really grabbed my attention simply because of how powerful the thing was compared with the C64.
Yeah.
And I had a C128 at the time. In fact, I just got a C128, and then I saw this thing, and I was like, "What?" Because the jump in technology to the A1000 back in the day was insane. To the point where Apple even, at CES, when the Amiga was originally still contracted to be an Atari machine, Apple actually accused them of using a Laserdisc player underneath to run the graphics that were running and things like that. And this is when it was a set of breadboards that went out in a curve, all netted together with actual wires. And the guys done the Boeing demo and had actually used a table tennis bat against the garage door to make the sound and all this kind of stuff, and sampled it.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been '84 that happened.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
But games wise, again, until the Amiga came along, nothing has stuck in my head.
No.
Particularly.
No, that's fair enough. So, do you have? Well, we'll try and cobble this one together then.
Okay.
Do you have it's a favorite toy from that period or favorite game?
Oh, favorite toy is definitely Optimus.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, there's nothing even remotely close. I mean, I love Jazz, I love Red Alert, but that toy, the fact that you've got the three sections, the three modules, in Roller, the battle deck, and Optimus himself, as it was said on the back of the text specs, that was always my favorite thing.
Yeah,
always. And I now have various versions of that toy.
Yeah,
running around. Game wise, I think we have to go forward a little bit for what sticks out, because some of my top games are things like the original The Settlers, Turrican and Turrican 2. Turrican 1 on the Commodore 64 being particularly of interest because it ripped off the soundtrack from Transformers the movie.
Right.
To the point where Chris Horsbeck has done a Turrican audio CD set, and he managed to get Vince DiCola to do a remix for it.
Right. Excellent.
It's just like, that's awesome. So yeah, I think it was things like that really grabbed my attention. And of course, RoboCop. RoboCop 3 really did grab my attention. The video game for that, because it was done by DID and it was 3D on the Amiga, and it was. It wasn't until years later I saw it running on a PC that I suddenly realised what it could look like, and then I reloaded it onto an A4000 and went, that's how it's supposed to work.
Right.
So yeah, but then, yes, that's kind of things that really that grab my attention. The Settlers, especially. I spent so many hours on that thing. It's insane.
Remember, what was there a last toy or game or last thing before you then started moving on? You know, when the adulting reared its ugly head and those childish things are starting being put away.
There was a period between my 16th and 18th birthdays where I'd started to sell off my Transformers. And let's see when that would have been. That was it. Yeah. and I'd lost interest because of the Action Masters.
Yeah.
Because it was like, what the hell's the point of a Transformer that doesn't transform?
Yeah.
That's all I had in my head. I still have now. Whenever I see a Transformer character that doesn't actually transform as a toy, it's like, what's the point of that?
Yeah.
And I basically started missing it, and the moment the comic finished, it was just like I was done. The thing is the majority of the other things I was into weren't really childish.
No.
And to a certain degree, I don't think British comic was all that childish either.
No.
I mean, my dad used to nick it and read it before I did.
Right.
So, and I saw it as a good piece of science fiction, as alongside Trek and so on and so forth. So, yes, the toys started disappearing, and I started getting rid of those. And then around about when I was 18, so this would have been what, 93. I think it was because I saw an original gold boxed Optimus Prime in Saber Center of all places.
Right.
And I was like, why did I sell mine? Am I crazy? I picked it up.
Yeah.
And I think that was the start of me getting involved with TMUK and stuff like that. Is me starting thinking, hold on a minute, there's more than just a toy here. This is something more. Action figures I never got into. Action figures I could be behind. Ironically, at that point, Playmates were putting out a load of Trek ones, which suddenly grabbed my attention as well. Right. So I was just like, it's like, and people were saying at the time, grow up. What are you doing? What are you thinking? I was like, no, you grow up. I enjoy these things. I don't care what anybody else thinks. So yes, damn it. If I want to collect these things, then I'll go and collect them. I mean, I was always picky on even the Trek action figures. I only went for the characters I liked. But with the very late G1 stuff like Thunderclash and Pyro, those got my attention.
Right.
Quite significantly. Initially, Beast Wars didn't interest me that much. I grabbed hold of the Primal Megatron Bat and Gator 2-pack.
Yeah.
Very early on, and the comic in that, and the actual suggestion in there that they were actually Optimus Prime and Megatron from G1 who had been reformatted, essentially.
Right.
But I didn't really pay that much attention to the rest of it until the TV show came out. Suddenly, this kid's TV show comes out, and it's like the first time I've really paid attention to a kid's TV show.
Yeah.
And I happened to be not a kid.
Yeah.
But the science fiction elements in Beast Wars were awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and the fact that it was a continuation of G1 helped immensely. I mean, Simon Furman did an episode, for heaven's sake.
Yes.
In the third season. And DC Fontana did an episode in the third season.
Yeah.
So, those names being attached to it eventually just underscored my love of the show.
Right.
And if anything, other than Next Gen, that was probably the biggest show I was a fan of.
Right.
At that point, I would never consider myself a fan of a show until Next Gen and Beast Wars. Those are the first two, really.
Right.
Because it took me ages to get into DS9 and Voyager and things like that. But the Beast Wars TV show grabbed me immediately. But probably because it was CG, and it was one of the very early CG shows, and that intrigued me. Because the CG section from Star Trek 2 was responsible for me being intrigued by the whole suggestion of creating film as computer generated. Because a lot of people don't realize that was the first ever fully CG'd bit of footage that was done for film. And the guys who did it went on to found Pixar.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, because it was part of ILM. So I basically, I suppose for the last toy that I remember, the one thing that sticks in my head is selling Venusaur.
Okay.
When I was 16 or 17 or something like that, and
Yeah.
regretting it almost immediately. And then not long after that, or maybe a year after that, finding that original Optimus gold box thing and then going, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Why am I selling these things? It doesn't make sense to me anymore. And though I may not have been as vocal as I would become about collecting and the fun of it, that's where most people in their 30s or 40s picked back up on the collecting bug. I was 18.
Right.
Yeah.
So I came out of it a bit earlier than what I expected, and then, like I say, I came back to it, which actually leads on to when it all started again for you. Which, I mean, I know you've kind of answered in a way.
Yeah.
But would you say it was definitely that Optimus Prime, or was there something after that cemented it or solidified it for you? And also,
I think
what was there any other circumstances that brought you to it as well?
Well, when I was in sixth form, I was living with my nan rather than my mum and dad because it was closer to where I was going to school.
Yeah.
Because I actually continued on from grammar school into sixth form in the same school. And I think I had a little more freedom.
Right.
There. I had basically the dining room was mine.
Right.
For all intents and purposes, that's where my computer was, and I was allowed to put things on top of a cabinet and stuff like that. So the models of an alien and a bird of prey and so on and so forth. And then it was at one point it was an Amiga 1500, then a 1200, then a 4000 in the corner. And I also lived there while I was at university.
Right.
So I went to Aston University for a year, almost a year and a bit in the end. And I actually dropped out of university because their course was so outdated, it was scary.
Right.
My graphics lecturer didn't know what a JPEG file was. That was the last straw.
Yeah.
And that was just after Commodore had gone bump as well. So I don't know what was going on in my head around that period. But my hormones took their time to kick in, and around about then is when they were going mental as well. So and after the incident when I was 16 and so on and so forth. In fact, in my A levels, I hadn't done very well because I couldn't remember things very well, and I actually went from an A at GCSE physics to an E at A level, and things like that. And I was trying to find a new baseline. Who the hell am I, kind of thing, because I wasn't sure anymore.
No.
And I ended up working in retail, and just trying to find myself. And I actually met my wife on the first day of university. And one of the first things she got me was a classic Gold Box Snarl.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know how she found it, because by that point that was not easy to find.
No.
So that would have been, let's see, 94. 94. So I'd had this Optimus had been running around for maybe a year by that point.
Yeah.
This classics Optimus. So it was from that point onwards that I just went and screw it. I love these things. I mean, I used to say, things like, look at the engineering on it. It's just an amazing piece of design, and the fact that I love the characters, and the fact that, and it was also things I was picking up on, like the packaging for 92, 93, 94 for the 92, 93. had grabbed my attention because they'd done the new version of the logo just for the British and European line.
Yeah.
And the sudden change in graphics as well had grabbed my attention.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that all culminated with my wife Claire getting Snarl, and then suddenly I was just like, why am I fighting this?
Yeah.
This stuff's awesome. Why aren't I just enjoying it?
Yeah.
So that's, and then there was the British G2 comic, and the last issue of that had the Transmasters UK piece in it. So I got hold of Matt Dallas and started messing around with Transmasters UK stuff, and I did the logo for the Continue Generation 2 at one point, and I think that the biggest surprise from that era is the fact that there was a couple of issues of that where James Roberts and Jack Lawrence had worked in them, and Nick Roche, and you're just like, wow. When you look back at that now, you're just like, I did the logo. I did just the logo, nothing else, just the logo for the front page of these zines, and these guys worked on it. It's just like, wow, that's awesome. But it was all that and finding the community, even though it was only through letters and so on and so forth. I mean, this is way before people were using Facebook and stuff like that. And finding this community of other people who had said, sod it, we love it too, and we don't care how old we are.
Yeah.
So I was just like, yeah, fair enough. I'm not on my own. And then that led to me hosting a Transformers TM UK meet at my flat after I moved out from my nan's, which then led to me talking to the Hartmans and trying to get the BotCon name for the UK. And when that got too damned complicated, I was coming up with the idea of doing something called IACon, literally IA-con.
Yeah.
And then we realized that was probably a bit too much of a jump. So I thought, let's do some meetings. Let's do what I did before, but let's do that in a hotel or a function room or something.
Yeah.
And there was a small club called Alpha Quadrant that I was involved in at the time, which is all part of Infinite Frontiers and all that stuff with Simon Plum. And I basically said, I want to do one of these, but it's Transformers, kind of like this thing I did a little while ago, but in a more formal setting. And that was the first auto assembler.
Right.
So they only had 15 people booked into it, and 30 people turned up. And the second one had 30 people booked in, and 60 turned up.
Right.
So and then I suddenly realized that I'd shot myself in the foot because the auto assembly had become a brand. Before I'd even realized it, and changing the name to Icon made no sense anymore.
No.
So I was all kind of on top of each other as the years went by in the 90s, because the first auto assembly was actually in the year 2000. And that was basically every little thing seemed to lock me in more and more and more into Transformers.
Right.
And it was just like, I at no point from, and I think it was Claire getting me the Snarl that was the tipping point, with the point of no return.
Right. Yeah.
When I'd started writing stuff and things like that. I'm trying to remember when I'd started writing on Model and Collector's Mart. I can't remember when that was. Might have been a few years later than that. But I wrote about Beast Wars in Area 51 magazine, and then I did Model and Collector's Mart magazine and stuff like that. So it all snowballed out of control. And it was interesting because Model and Collector's Mart was actually being edited by Simon Brew, who I went to school with.
Right.
He's now the head editor on a couple of film magazines.
Yeah.
And the other thing he was getting involved with at the time was Micromart.
Right. Right.
So while this was all going on with Transformers, I was talking about Amiga stuff to people and getting involved in Amiga circles as well. So all of a sudden, by the year 2000, I was collecting Transformers, Star Trek stuff, and Amigas.
Right.
So there's the triumvirate that resulted in the logo that I tend to have kicking around at times.
Yeah.
Which is the boring ball with the Starfleet emblem and the auto assembly logo on it.
Yeah.
Because what most people see as the auto assembly logo was actually designed as a marker for my toy collection.
Right.
So I have stickers
Yeah.
on every one of my Autobots has got one of those on.
Right.
So if you ever find a Transformer that's got that logo on it, it was in my collection at some point.
Right. So really then you could probably say you didn't really have a break then, did you? It kind of just seemed to blend and morph in.
I mean, if anything, I tried to have a break.
Yeah.
And I was trying to grow up and then thought I was being a moron.
Right. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Growing up is very moronic, and I think less people should do it. Most definitely.
Yeah. Every time someone suggests that, I've got the Tom Baker Doctor comment in my head of what's the point of growing up if you can't be childish sometimes.
So, looking at your collection that you've got now, because I can see some of it there in the background, just peeking over your left shoulder. What? I mean, this kind of blends in from the last one, but what's shaping your collecting and your habits now? Your motivations behind it. Makes sense. I've asked that one right.
I'm very. I think I like everybody in the UK who's a collector. We're now going, where the hell do I put this stuff? Because we haven't got the biggest houses on the planet, have we? We're not like the American collectors who have like huge amounts of space they can put this stuff into. So I've sort of like, I can't do the I want to collect everything thing because that's just there's not enough room in anything, and it's just unattainable at this point because there's so much of it. So I've concentrated on a few branches. So I've tried to complete my 84 to 86 collection. My brother and I, we're collecting all of the masterpieces,
right?
Because that's too expensive for one person.
Yes,
and then it's primarily based on characters. So I want to have every Optimus.
Okay, yeah,
because that's my way. I want to have all the Jazzes. I want to have all the Red Alerts. Unfortunately, this also has started growing to Soundwave, Blaster, all the cassettes. Suddenly you're thinking, where am I going to put all this stuff? And then you think, hold on, I'm collecting Eagle Moss starships. Where are they going to go?
Right,
Especially in that collection ended up at 180.
Is that how many there is now of those?
No, there's way more than that. That's just the initial collection that went to 180 instead of 60.
Right.
And now there's spin-off collections and online specials and bonuses and all sorts. There's well over, I'd say there's over 250 different vessels now.
Have you been getting the bigger ones as well, the larger ones?
No, I've absolutely got nowhere to put them. The only one I did specifically get was the 1701A XL, which was so hideously wrong.
Right.
That I moaned about it for at least 2 videos.
Right.
On the Geekology channel.
Yeah.
Because it's not they used blueprints from the motion picture before the bridge module got changed. So it's totally not the A.
No. I was looking at one of those on eBay a few weeks ago, and how expensive they are.
Yeah. I mean, when it came out, it was $49.99.
Yeah.
And that's too expensive for then.
Yeah.
And now, it's insane.
I think this one I was looking at, it was about £250, £260.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
And it's like
totally not worth it.
Is it about 8 or 9 inches, something like that? And it's
none of the XLs can be more than 11.5 inches because of the licensing that Eagle Moss had.
Right.
If anything that's 12 inches or above was a toy and was with Diamond.
Right.
And licensing, and then is now with Playmates. So yeah, and just trying to put those somewhere was just no, that's not happening. I've got collectibles that haven't been opened since 2017.
Right.
There are 64-liter really useful boxes,
Yeah.
stuffed with stuff I haven't opened.
Right.
Because I'd literally, there was the occasional thing where I'd just literally gone, oh, I really like that, I'll grab that. It arrived, I'll put it in a box, and then either I'd forgotten I'd got it, or real life took over.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then COVID hit. And one of the main reasons I had for getting these things out was to do reviews for Geekology.
Yeah.
With David, who's my co-presenter on that. And we couldn't film anymore when COVID hit. So again, stuff started going into boxes.
Yeah.
So I find myself for the last year, since we came out of lockdown, the main lockdown sort of like periods, where I don't know what I've got.
Right.
But yeah, that's basically where I am at the moment. I've actually got to the point where I've now got spreadsheets I am checking when I'm going through boxes, and so on and so forth. Because there's so much of this stuff.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, what the hell? With a masterpiece spreadsheet alone, I'm just like, I've got things struck out in orange because I've got another version of it from the British release or the American release,
and
all this kind of stuff, and like ones that I've got marked with "You'll be bloody lucky." Sleep mode Optimus Prime. That's never happening.
Yeah, I love spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are life. All my collection is on a spreadsheet. All my Spectrum and Sinclair stuff's on a spreadsheet. And it just, every time, like you, if I get something to replace, I note it down, and I'm a geek for a spreadsheet. I love them.
I've severely got to go back and do that with all my Amigas because there's 19 Amigas in here somewhere.
Right.
So, and I was speaking about that earlier. Actually, is that with Micromart, going back to Simon Brew, and the fact I was working on Model and Collector's Mart magazine. Simon was then editing Micromart, and I ended up doing an Amiga column in Micromart on a weekly basis at one point.
Yeah.
From 1999. The first one of that column was August 1999, after I'd done a special in the April. And my Amiga Mart column continued until the magazine closed in 2016.
Right.
So it was an Amiga column in a general magazine.
Yeah.
For 17 years.
Right.
That started.
Yeah.
5 years after Commodore went bankrupt.
Right.
So I'm fairly proud of that, to be honest.
Well, it could have been worse. It could have been bought by a Barrow boy and turned into an Amstrad.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, it's like, oh yes, a +2. No, that's a CPC. That is.
Yeah. Well, the first ones were Sinclair architecture. It was essentially a 128K in a grey box with a tape recorder. But after that, when they went to the I'm doing it. I try to keep them separate.
You can't. It's all this is the realm of geekology. You have it all mixes, and you don't even realize how much it all mixes.
Well, that's the thing. I do have. I do try to keep them as separate as I can. I have the Vaults of Icon stuff, which is Transformers, Zoids, or whatever, that fall into Action Force and whatever. And then I have another side, which is Spectral Horace ZX, and he's on Instagram as well. And that's where all me computer stuff, the Spectrum or anything retro, computers, 70s, 80s, Atari, Commodore, whatever, all that goes into that side. I have on occasion unsuccessfully tried to merge them and let them cross paths. But I've found the very strangest things. I was talking to, I think it was was it Rudy or was it Phil? No, it was Rudy the other day who'll be coming up in an interview, depending on when it goes out, either before or after this.
Okay.
And when I've tried to cross them or merge them in some places, absolutely baffles me. But you end up losing followers or you don't get as many likes.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's all that about? But the crossover has been a logical one because, as you'll know, they did release it for the Commodore. They did as a Transformers game.
Yeah.
Which came out in '85, again by Ocean. You've got a copy there, haven't you?
Yep. There's the Commodore 64 and the Spectrum version.
Yep. I've got about 4 or 5 copies of the Spectrum version.
Oh, right, okay. I've got the Activision one as well.
Yeah. Oh, excellent.
So that's the original Activision Commodore 64 cassette and the Mastertronic reissue.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, so I have tried crossing them, but like I said, that thing, it's the strangest thing that happens. But I've lost my train of thought now. Where were we going with all this? Oh, who knows? Who knows?
Who knows?
It'll be right.
Yeah. But looking at my collection now, I mean, it's like,
yeah.
What's my favorite piece of my collection? It's still Optimus. Yeah. And it's a tie between the original one and MP10.
Right. Yeah. There's still quite a lot of appreciation for MP10. I mean,
I don't have an MP44.
No.
And I'm not in any hurry.
No.
Because it's not my Optimus.
No. If I could offer any advice, and if you'd be willing to take it, if you were thinking about an MP44, I'd get the KO version because it is solid. It's great. They've addressed a lot of the issues, the QC issues that the official one had. I have the KO version, and it's solid. It's a good figure. It's just that you don't get the trailer or anything with it.
Yeah.
But I don't transform him. He's in robot mode. He's stood in his heroic pose, and that's where he is. I mean, at the moment, I've got this on my desk, which is the Magic Square, but the first Magic Square one.
Okay.
I take one out now and again and just put it on the desk and leave it there. But but MP10, I still have my MP10. And I still think a lot of it. It is quite nice. I just feel it's a bit of a shame that there isn't really, well, for me anyway, there's not really a Megatron, an MP style Megatron that quite fits in really well with him. The closest one I found was the Make Toys one.
Right. Yeah. I cheat a little bit because I use an MP36 Plus.
Yes.
So that's my Optimus and Megatron.
Yeah.
And then I was looking at the MP44 as being the one that would go with MP36.
Yes.
So that's my Transformers the movie, Optimus and Megatron. That's the way I look at those guys more than anything. But I mean, it's like I much prefer the Plus version of Shockwave as well. To Lilac Boy.
Yeah, well, I agree. I agree that I had the original Shockwave, but then when they brought the Plus version, he was yoinked out the door, and because I just the darker purple is just a lot better. I think it just looks, it suits the character better. I think as well.
Definitely.
One of the MP44 KOs I've got, I did do a little bit of a custom paint on it to try and make it look like a bit of a merger between the toy and the way he appears in the comic.
Right.
So then I have him, when I do get him out, I display him with MP36. The only thing with MP36, I mean, I ought to do it myself, but I don't want to damage it. But I wish someone would maybe make an extra hinge for the gun barrel to sit a bit better when it's folded down.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of, it's forced. It's forced when it's there. It doesn't seem natural, it being there.
Yeah.
And I know that, I think it's a few years ago now, Ben from Ben's Collectibles, he did a 3D printed trigger crotch.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Where you can just clip on underneath. but I never got around to getting one. But
Fair
no,
enough.
it's a good choice. It's a good choice having Prime as your favourite. As like I
Yeah.
say, with it being such an iconic design.
Yeah.
Now,
Totally.
you mentioned this a bit earlier. It might be still included, or there may be something else. But you did mention about the Grail item and this reconfigurable Enterprise.
Yeah.
But is there another Grail item or like something attainable, a goal that you maybe want to work towards of something that you want to get? Oh, actually, no. Sorry, is there? No, so I apologize. I'm skipping a question there. What I meant to ask you was next, with regard to your current collection, is there anything that's on your radar at the moment? You know, any gaps that you want to fill, or you know, what have you got coming in next? Any pre-orders, things?
System error. Human interface disengaged. Accessing shutdown program.